The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde was an Irish playwright, novelist, essayist, and poet. He became fluent in French and German early in life. After university, Wilde moved to London into fashionable cultural and social circles. After writing in different forms throughout the 1880s, he became one of London's most popular playwrights in the early 1890s. At the turn of 1890s, he refined his ideas about the supremacy of art in a series of dialogues and essays, and incorporated themes of decadence, duplicity, and beauty into his only novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. He is remembered for his epigrams novels, plays, as well as the circumstances of his imprisonment and early death. The theme of the story. The first theme of the story is that outward beauty is nothing. It is just a show. The real beauties are love and sacrifices. The second theme is that love and sacrifices are two saving forces. And the last theme is that there is great gap between the rich and the poor, the rulers and the masses. A short summary of the chapter. The statue of the Happy Prince was a beautiful statue of a real prince. He was covered with gold, he had sapphires for his eyes, and a ruby on his sword. This statue was set on a tall column by the courtiers. The statue of the Happy Prince sees all the misery of his city. He weeps when he sees people in trouble. He wanted to help them. A swallow stayed at the feet of a statue of the Happy Prince for the night. On the Happy Prince's request, he prolonged his stay and helped the poor with the ruby and the sapphires. When the Happy Prince could not see anymore, the swallow decided to stay with him forever. Then he helped the people with the gold covering of the Happy Prince. At the end, he died of frost. The heart of the Happy Prince also broke. Early next morning, the mayor passed by the square below with the town councillors. They noticed that the Happy Prince statue was in a shabby looks. The ruby had fallen out, the sapphires of the eyes were nowhere, and the statue was no longer golden. They pulled it down and sent it to furnace. The statue did not melt in the furnace, and therefore it was thrown out in the dust heap, where that swallow was already lying. An angel came and took the laden heart and the dead swallow to God as the two most precious things. Let us proceed to the chapter. The main characters here are the Happy Prince and the swallow. The Happy Prince is a beautiful statue which parts with all its wealth to help the poor and needy. And the swallow is a migrant bird who sacrifices his life to help the prince in distributing his valuables among the poor. Let's begin. The Happy Prince was a beautiful statue. He was covered with gold. He had sapphires for eyes and a ruby on his sword. What did he want to part with all the gold he had and his precious stones? High above the city, on a tall column, stood the statue of the Happy Prince. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes he had two bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed on his sword hilt. One night, there flew over the city a little swallow. His friends had gone away to Egypt 6 weeks before, but he had stayed behind. Then he decided to go to Egypt too. All day long he flew, and at night time he arrived at the city. "Where shall I put up?" he said. "I hope the town has made preparations." Then he saw the statue on a tall column. "I will put up here," he cried. "It's a fine position with plenty of fresh air." So he alighted just between the feet of the happy prince. So you heard about the description of the happy prince, that the happy prince was a beautiful statue of a real prince. He was covered with gold, he had sapphires for eyes, and a red ruby on his sword. The statue was set on a tall column by his courtiers. One day it happened that a swallow, a migratory bird, happened to reach there. He wanted to spend the night there, so he was looking for a place. Then he found the statue of the happy prince, and he thought of taking shelter there. So he alighted just between the feet of the happy prince. "I have a golden bedroom," he said softly to himself as he looked around, and he prepared to go to sleep. But just as he was putting his head under his wing, a large drop of water fell on him. "What a curious thing," he cried. "There is not a single cloud in the sky. The stars are quite clear and bright, and yet it's raining." So here, when the swallow was about to sleep, some drops of water fell on him, and he was actually surprised to see that, because the sky was clear. From where could the raindrops fall? And still it was raining, so he was actually surprised to see that. Then another drop fell. "What's the use of a statue if it cannot keep the rain off?" he said. "I must look for a good chimney pot." And he determined to fly away. So when another drop of water fell on him, he was disturbed, so he wanted to change the place. So he was about to fly to some other place, but before he had opened his wings, a third drop fell, and he looked up and saw. What did he see? So when he was about to fly away, a third drop of water fell on him. Then he looked up to see from where the water was coming. Then he understood the source of the water. The eyes of the happy prince were filled with tears, and tears were running down his golden cheeks. His face was so beautiful in the moonlight, and the little swallow was filled with pity. So when the swallow looked up, he saw the eyes of the happy prince were filled with tears, and the water was coming down from his tears. It was the teardrops. The prince looked very beautiful, and the swallow immediately liked the statue. But when he saw the statue crying or shedding tears, he felt pity for the statue. "Who are you?" he said. "I am the happy prince." "Why are you weeping then?" asked the swallow. "You have quite drenched me." So here the swallow asked the prince who he was, and the prince answered that he was the happy prince. Then the swallow asked him back, "If you are a happy prince, then why do you cry?" He also said that he had almost made him wet. Now the swallow is telling the reason for his mourning. "When I was alive and had a human heart," answered the statue, "I did not know what tears were, for I lived in the palace where sorrow is not allowed to enter. My courtiers called me the happy prince, and happy indeed I was. So I lived, and so I died. And now that I am dead, they have set me up here so high that I can see the ugliness and all the misery of my city, and though my heart is made of lead, yet I cannot choose but weep." Now when the swallow asked the happy prince for the reason for his crying or weeping, he said that when he was alive and he had a human heart, he was a human, now he has become a statue. He was a prince and lived in the palace, and he never knew what sorrows were, and he never shed his tears. His courtiers called him happy prince, no, as his name, as they gave him the name happy prince, he was happy indeed. He did not have any suffering. So in that way he lived, and he died in a happy way. But after his death, they made a statue of himself and put him upon a tall column so that others could see, look at him, and those who are suffering, they look at him and become happy. Now that he is put up on a tall column, he is able to see his whole city and the ugliness and the misery and the suffering of his people. So, although his heart is made of lead now, made of metal, but he cannot control, he cannot help himself. That is the reason why he is weeping or crying. What? Is he not solid gold? Said the swallow to himself. He was too polite to make any personal remarks. So the statue of the happy prince was made of gold, thin leaves of fine gold. But it was only plated gold. But the inside of the statue was made of metal. So his heart was leaden heart. Now the statue begins to speak. Far away, continued the statue in a low musical voice. Far away, in a little street, there is a poorhouse. One of the windows is open, and through it I can see a woman seated at a table. Her face is thin and worn, and she has coarse red hands, all pricked by the needle, for she is a seamstress. She is embroidering flowers on a satin gown for the loveliest of the queen's maids of honor to wear at the next court ball. In a bed in the corner of the room, her little boy is lying ill. He has a fever and is asking his mother to give him oranges. His mother has nothing to give him but river water. So he is crying. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you not bring her the ruby out of my sword hilt? My feet are fastened to this pedestal and I cannot move. Now the swallow is requesting the prince is requesting the swallow to help him. He told that he could see far away in his country, in his city, a poor woman. She's a seamstress, a tailor. She is actually embroidering flowers in a cloth. So this was given by the queen's maids of honor. She was supposed to wear it at a next court ball. So she is preparing for it. And her son is sick and he is lying on a bed. He has got high fever. He's asking his mother to give him some oranges, but his mother is unable to give him anything as she has no money. She will get some money only if she finishes the cloth, embroidering the cloth. So her hands are also pricked by the needle. Now it has become coarse. So the prince felt pity for the seamstress and he is asking the swallow to be his messenger, to remove the sword ruby from his sword hilt and give it to the poor seamstress so that she could sell it and get it some money and buy some oranges and medicines for her son.